basically. And I'm tired because by now it's like noon 30, and I'm just exhausted. I am physically exhausted from having to run around and try and sort all this shit out. I am emotionally exhausted from arguing with customer service at these stores. I'm just, I was exhausted. So as I'm walking to find this bus stop that I knew had to be there somewhere, I just had never actually gone to this bus stop. This white minivan pulls up, and the driver says, "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Now, this is Abilene, Texas. There's a church on almost every corner. So I'm sitting there going, yay, Good Samaritan. I'm tired and I'm just going a mile down the road. This will save me however long. And it'll be great. So I get in the car. By the way, I use van, car, truck interchangeably. Car just to me basically means motorized vehicle. Okay. So I get in the car, and we start heading down the road. And once we passed the United, I knew I was in trouble. I knew that I had not been picked up by a Good Samaritan. He took me to this, field sort of area, parked the car, and he forced me to perform oral sex on him. And then he handed me my cane and left me there in the middle of this field. I later found out it was by a sort of softball field. Off of East South 11th, which ironically is now close to where I live, but anyways, the upshot of it is those few seconds, and I do mean seconds, okay? I know it's not funny. I'm not trying to make light. I am just trying not to completely fall apart talking about this. But those few seconds, had I not reported it, had I not pressed charges, had I not followed through, those few seconds were nothing to him. It was a fix. It was a power trip. He wanted to feel in control and like he was a big man. I think the thing that sticks out the most in my mind from that incident, that this is what haunts me the most, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is when he finished, he held my head down, pushed it down, and he goes, "Swallow it. Swallow it." I'm going to have to pause for a second. Okay, I'm back. I know for you that was like nothing, but for me that was a couple of minutes. But that sticks out in my mind for two reasons. First of all, fuck, that was traumatizing. That was terrifying. That was... It was awful. But with the benediction of hindsight, that was the stupidest thing he could have done. Because what ended up happening is, through the rape kit that they did and the swab that they took at the back of my throat, normally when something like this happens, they'll find DNA. They'll find DNA in the seminal fluid. But that's about it. It's just seminal fluid. But with me, they found a whole sperm. So because he insisted that I swallow it, that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he did it. And that was what brought him down. There's this song by Emily Autumn called Swallow. And she's talking about her experiences with mental illness and medication and stuff. But the chorus says, I will swallow if it will make my sea level go down, but I'll come back and haunt you if I drown. And that always rings a chord with me, because I think about that moment. And that need that he had to be in control and to have power over me. That was what brought him down. That was just a moment to him. But he didn't count on me making the choice to not let that ruin my life. He didn't count on that. Because why would a blind girl do that? Why would any woman do that? Why would any woman admit that this happened? But because of all this shit that he did on that day, his story kept changing. And because his story kept changing, people didn't believe him. And actually, I mentioned that it took 2 trials. The first trial, the jury couldn't unanimously decide on the verdict. But it wasn't because they didn't think he did it. 6 of them were like, yeah. Actually, all of them thought that he did it. It was just 6 of them were like, well, she could have gotten out of the car at any moment. And that's upsetting. But the reason that I'm talking about this is because we're all victims at some point. And in being victimized, it's just a moment. It's just a moment in time. A few seconds, a few minutes, a few hours. It's just a moment. It's just a drop in the bucket when you look at the big picture. But there's a choice that we make about whether or not that moment is going to define us negatively or positively. And in the moment, and even in the immediate aftermath of the moment, it's not always easy to see where it's going, to see the good that came from that situation. But it's there. And I'm going through this situation with Child Protective Services and my son, and I guarantee you that this situation means fuck all to the bureaucrats handling it. It means nothing. It means fuck all. But I have this choice about whether or not it's going to ruin my life. And it's not always easy to make that choice. Just like it wasn't easy back then, and it's still not easy now to choose not to let that asshole in his need for dominance to ruin my life. I'm not gonna lie, I still have nightmares. I still occasionally have panic attacks. I still have flashbacks. It was a very traumatic experience for me. And I can sit here and say, well, at least this and at least that, and other people have had it worse, and I get it. But trauma is trauma. Period. But it's not going to ruin my life. Just like CPS isn't going to ruin my life. I'm going to get my kid back. I'm going to get my kid back. And I'm going to move past this. It's not easy. Just like I say in the intro theme song to this song, it's not always easy to keep looking up when everything around you is falling down. It's not. And that's why I regularly and constantly say on this show, when I talk about being positive, I'm not talking about always being happy, always being upbeat. I'm not talking about being delusional and pretending like there's nothing wrong in the world, in your world, in the world in general, in the universe at large. There's a lot of things wrong, but it's about looking at that and saying, you know what? I am not going to be defined by negativity. And when negativity comes into my life, I'm going to turn it into a positive. So, I think this was probably one of the hardest shows that I ever had to do. Because it's not something I talk about much anymore. I usually don't mention it at all. And if I do, it's always just, I was sexually assaulted once. But when I heard that line, I was like, I've got to talk about that on the Positivity Podcast on Monday. I've got to talk about it. I've got to talk about it for me. And I've got to talk about it in the hopes that somebody who needs to hear this show will hear this show.